call the meeting to order of the Board of Sewer Commissioners for Tuesday, April 26, 2016. All items on the agenda may be subject to a vote or action by the Board of Sewer Commissioners. The meeting is being televised and recorded. If anyone in the audience is videotaping, please acknowledge so at this time. Seeing none, there's nobody recording. Okay, great. We have minutes for March 31st, 2015, and March 8th, 2016.
Mr. Chairman, on the minutes for March 8th, I would move to approve as submitted
For March 8th?
for March 8th,
2016.
2016.
Okay. For a motion, and
Second.
Mr. Myers seconded to approve the minutes. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Abstain.
I have an abstention with Mr. Blanton, thank you. The March 2015 minutes, were these lost in a desk somewhere?
They were lost in the shuffle.
2015, okay. Mr. Meyer, did you have
There's an error on page 3.
page 3? We have
I can't-
correction.
Yes, I can't move and second the same motion. I believe Mr. Mealy seconded my motion.
Yeah, it would
Okay.
be under 3B, and I believe Mr. Meyer is correct.
Okay,
I make a motion to approve subject to that correction.
very good.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes with the correction on page 3, the first vote, which has been corrected, indicate Mr. Meyer moved and Mr. Mealy seconded the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? One excused?
Abstain.
An abstention with Mr. Blanton again, thank you. Okay, we have update from the wastewater advisory committee on various projects to include Buzzards Bay water quality monitoring, Queen Sewell Park topography, and a Weston and Sampson preliminary design for a disposal field, and a filing of an ENF, which is something.
Environmental notification form.
Thank you. Go right ahead, Mr. Yule, if you,
I'm pleased to report that both our short-term project, our interim project, and our long-range project are right on schedule and moving along well. The Weston and Sampson was out on Queen Sewell Park all last week doing a detailed topographic survey, which is the first stage in getting their design going for the subsurface disposal. I have finished preparing the environmental notification form. I still need a couple of attachments from Weston and Sampson, but expect to be submitting that by the middle of May to get that published. There's a couple of month review period on that, but there's no urgency on it at this point. The long-range plan is gotten interesting. We've been having monthly meetings, progress meetings among the various participants. And the participants at this point include 4 towns, because Marion is aboard on it too. So Plymouth, Wareham, Bourne, and Marion, the Mass Maritime Academy, and the Buzzards Bay Coalition. The meetings have also been regularly attended by representatives from Mass DEP, from Coastal Zone Management, from Fisheries, from the federal EPA, and these representatives are clearly excited about the prospect of a multi-town project moving ahead. And this could become a model for other coastal communities, both in the state and in other states. The Buzzards Bay Coalition has bought a monitoring buoy, which monitors the water quality. It will monitor a dozen or so different parameters of water quality. This buoy is being moored just south of the Maritime Academy, where the channel from Buttermilk Bay comes into the canal. So it will catch the water quality from both channels at the same time. The water quality has to be monitored for 2 years before they can even move ahead on their permit for a ocean discharge or a canal discharge. And that work will actually be done by cadets at the Maritime Academy. And once again, the Maritime Academy has really been very cooperative in this. Both the faculty and the administration there are excited by the fact that they can incorporate this monitoring program into their curriculum so that the cadets get some real hands-on experience doing environmental work as well as their maritime work. And then during the summer months, when the cadets are off, there are cadets who stay on the campus as part of their work-study program, and those cadets will be doing the monitoring during the summer months. So that's the first big step on this. Wareham has hired surveyors to survey the railroad right-of-way, which apparently hasn't been done since 1850-something. And that's so that they can begin preliminary evaluation of whether or not it is feasible to run the outfall line along the railroad.
Excuse me just one second. Mr. Roush, you recording? I am, sir. Okay, we have a notation for the minutes that Mr. Roush is now present, if you would, and he is recording and has notified the board. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's it. So basically, we're on schedule with both projects, and I'd be glad to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wes, can you remind us what the timeline is for the hopeful, if the Queen Sewell project is to go forward, what's the hopeful timeline as to when that would be online and running?
We're looking at December of 2017.
Great, thank you.
And at this point, depending upon how the financing goes, the program that we're most interested in financing, the Mass Works program, usually opens about mid-June. And the applications are due the first week in September, and then the award comes in right after the first of the year. We also will be applying for other programs just to make sure we have a belts and suspenders attitude on this.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Meyer.
You're talking about the possibility of tying in with Wareham with the new treatment, with their expanded treatment plant, and then the affluent coming down the railway and dumping into the canal?
Yes, the idea is that Wareham's treatment plant right now is licensed for 2 million gallons per day. It currently operates at about 1.6 million because the treated effluent now goes into the Agawam River. If they can run a treated wastewater line down the railroad right away, or it may come down 6A, or Route 6, which is the alternate plan, but the preferred way is to run it down the railroad right of way to the Maritime Academy. The Maritime Academy has an existing outfall. It would have to be relicensed to handle a higher volume of disposal. Everyone involved in the project has told us, well, that's a long, involved process. It's going to take 10 years, but you'll get it. It'll happen, provided all the engineering works out, and it works out. Once Wareham is able to do that, they can immediately increase their treatment to 2 million gallons per day, which means an additional 400,000 gallons per day that they can put on right away without even expanding their plant. And then they can proceed with an expansion of their plant. They're using less than half of the site that they're on now, so they have plenty of room to expand in that location.
However, if this effluent is treated and it's able to be discharged in the canal, why don't we just dump it in Wareham where they're doing it now? Why bother spending all that money to pipe it all the way down when they're already dumping into the Agawam River? If it's good enough to be dumped into our waters out here, it should be good enough to be dumped in Wareham where it belongs. Well, not where it belongs, but where it could be discharged.
It's not the quality, Peter, that determines the difference. It's the volume.
Okay.
The Agawam River is basically a tidal estuary. It's very slow flowing, very low volume. The canal contains some 5 billion gallons of water. About 2 billion gallons of that moves northward with every tidal cycle, and about a billion gallons of it moves southward with every tidal. So that there's a much higher dilution to the point where the engineers are telling us, and the people from the coalition are saying, we won't even be able to measure it once it gets into the canal, where you put that same volume into the Agawam River, and it really could have severe environmental effects.
Because my biggest fear, you know, it may say that it has the ability to flush it all out, but my biggest fear is I don't want to see the recreational selfish industry that's up and down this canal be ruined for someone else's gain. That's all I'm saying. I mean, I'm excited about it, but I would like to know more about it as time goes on, because I don't want to sacrifice one for the other.
There won't be a sacrifice one for the other. In fact, we discussed that at the last meeting. Most of that area along the canal, and even part of the area just south of the academy, is already closed for shell fishing.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Yule?
Thank you.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll see you next month. I guess I have a question from Mr. Mulvey. Go right ahead.
Just a basic observation here, and I know you're aware of it, that candidates for sewer commissioner in Wareham have publicly said if we can ship our treated wastewater to the railroad bridge, then we can enlarge our plant and possibly take on input from other towns. Marion, Mattapoisett, and then by doing that, we are going to increase our revenue. So it isn't just a case of relieving the present burden. They want to increase the size of the plant, and you then will have an increased flow. You know, the other thing that bothers me here is, of course, and it's been mentioned before, the dispersion. But there's a difference between what goes down into the subsoil and the hydrology and leaches out over a period of time on a distance to having what amounts to a hose shooting it into a rather limited amount of water. And you have fresh water going into a marine environment. And then, of course, the other consideration is perhaps your nitrogen is lessened by treatment and your bacteria and virus are pretty much gone. But you still have your other dissolved things in there, particularly the pharmaceuticals, the hormones, and so many of the other dissolved metals that are still going to go down and out even in a treated effluent. So there's a good deal of thought to be given this, but as I say, there's a big difference in it being into the environment over a period of the surface water, the water, or coming out in one dense plume like a hose. Thank you.
Based on that, I have a question for Mr. Yule. If that were to come to fruition, what would the time frame be on that with coming down the track?
Well, that's why it takes 10 years to get a permit. Jim is absolutely right. All of these things need to be evaluated.
I won't be on the board in that time, so Good luck
I
to
probably
whoever
won't be
is.
doing this job that time either. But we're looking probably at somewhere between 10, 15 years to do it. And that's why we're looking at doing the interim plan, because we need capacity before then.
okay. And the potential completion pending funding on Queen Sewell is December 2017.
Yes.
So that's just about
Year and a
just
half.
over a year and a half away.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're right on schedule for that at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Yule. Ms. Riggs, do you have anything to add? No? Okay, just checking. All right. All right, moving on. Item number 3, 25 Perry Avenue, project update regarding land acquisition, site development, and allocation. Yeah, just come on up to the podium, sir, and give us your names so that the public at home knows who they're listening to.
My name is Leonard Bello. I'm an attorney in office in Wareham, and I represent Allied Ventures and the petitioner before you, Brian Correa individually.
Okay.
So we've been before you a number of times, And basically, to give you an update, the last time that we were here, we reported to you that we had a closing scheduled for January 15th, that we were at that closing. The financier was at the closing. The realtors were at the closing. The hotel developers' lawyers were at the closing, and the sellers were not. Alex Byron, one of the Byron members, decided not to appear at the closing, told everybody on his side of the table that he would not appear at the closing because of a dispute that the family members were having. So we appeared before you, we gave you that information. It was discussed that in order to try to move forward, that the seller's attorney addressed you and said that they would file a petition to partition the property and try to get movement in that fashion to see if the court would appoint a commissioner and sell the property. Attorney Martin Drilling was hired by the remaining siblings who wanted to go forward, and a petition to partition was filed in the Barnstable County Probate Court. That petition to partition was scheduled by the court. It had a return date of the 25th of April. So that return date is a date by which if somebody has any opposition, they must file their opposition before that date. And if there's no oppositions filed, then a commissioner would automatically be appointed, the property would be sold, and this whole deal would be going forward. I believe it was 2 days prior to the 25th where an opposition was filed on behalf of Alex Byron. There was then a hearing held on the 25th, and the court was presented with an argument by Mr. Byron's attorney that essentially delays the project. It says that he now is seeking to partition the actual physical land and give 20% to him and divide out that portion of property, and that he's entitled to have a hearing on whether the land can physically be divided by the interests of the ownership. And the court agreed that he's entitled to that hearing and scheduled a pretrial conference for June 15th. So that's the next court date. In the meantime, because an attorney only filed an appearance 2 days before the 25th of April, or thereabouts, it was 2 or 3 days, because I've been in touch with Mr. Drilling on almost a weekly basis since we last left. Negotiations have really just started between him and the attorney for Mr. Byron. And we're trying to figure out what it is that Mr. Byron really wants, or whether this is just a family issue that is between him and his siblings. Because in essence, dividing out the property and giving him 20% of the land is very counterproductive to a position that he's already been offered by the other family members. It doesn't make any sense. It would be okay on our side of the coin. We'll go ahead with the other 7 acres of land, but it's not going to happen. Not going to happen right away until they can resolve their differences.
Do you have more, or do you?
Well, it really depends on what the board's position
Well,
is.
we have a question
in-
from the administrator then.
Yep.
I wasn't sure if you were in the middle of a sentence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My only question becomes, you go, a pretrial conference is scheduled for June 15th.
Yes.
The other side comes in on June 14th and says, we request a continuance, Your Honor. And it's granted. You know, what are we looking at? And I suppose this is more of a question of the sewer commissioners, but What's the outside timetable that we're looking at here?
There's no way that I can answer that and have any confidence in that response. It's up to judges, and I've been in the system long enough to know, I mean, I'm just listening to the fellow in front of you talk about getting permits and licenses maybe 10 years down the road. I mean, you deal within the judicial system and some fellow or lady in a robe makes this decision. Does he grant the continuance because somebody comes in on the 14th? Most judges would not do that, but some judge may, and it's not within my control. I'm not even involved in that case. I'm not a party to that case. I have nothing to do with it. And I have Attorney Drilling here and asked him to appear so he can answer directly. He's the one controlling that case. He may be better able to answer that. Our goal in filing the case was to try to get it resolved and move forward. Our alternative, and we do have alternatives, it's not what we really want, but our alternatives are, we just file a lawsuit against the Byron family, and we seek specific performance of the contract. We go into court. Those trials in schedules usually take years, not months, unless they settle. That's not an avenue we want to take. The other avenue we take is put us back in our original position, what we came in front of this town for to begin with. We own 25 Perry Ave. You made an allocation to 25 Perry Ave. We came before you looking to do a residential project. We switched that over when it was suggested by the town to go to a hotel. Well, put us back. We're ready to go forward. We have our 3 acres. We'll build the residential project and do the hotel later. Let the case go through. It's not the ideal. The hotel developer's on board now, willing to stick with us. And I have a letter from his attorney telling me we'll stick with you for the time being. But they also are interested. They need some solution to this case.
What court is this in?
This is in the Barnstable Probate
Probate
Court.
court, okay.
This is not a Superior Court case.
What is but you would sue in Superior Court if you're gonna do that?
Yes.
Then why did we get a petition from the land court?
Well, it's a blank.
The copy of it, there's no case number on it. It says Barnstable Registry District. Is there a land court case as well? Please, would you just introduce yourself, sir, and then feel free to answer either one of the attorneys.
Yeah, my name is Martin Drilling. I'm an attorney in Plymouth. I'm representing the 80% interests of the Byron family following the petition, and I want to apologize. Attorney Bello had asked me to send a copy of the petition. Clearly, since my secretary wasn't in, I forwarded the wrong petition. We had originally thought about filing a petition in land court, but we ended up filing it in Barnstable Probate Court. I had just sent, this is clearly my error, but when you file a petition, you don't have a docket number until the court assigns it after you filed it. And we have been assigned the docket number, and we had the hearing, as Attorney Bello said, yesterday on the appointment of the commissioner. But this was a ministerial error solely on my part, and I certainly can provide a copy of the probate court petition to the commission.
Yeah, you could probably send that to the town administrator. He'll be glad to give you a card with his email on it, and that way he can distribute it to the members of the board.
I'll get that
Okay,
off.
so we're back at the place of, you have 3 acres that you own. Refresh my memory, how many residential units would you put there?
Based on the sewer allotment, we would do a array of 2 and 3 bedrooms. So we'd have, let me just double check my math here. 45 3-bedrooms and 78 2-bedrooms. That would cover the sewer allocation. As Mr. Bellows said, we would next do the hotel plan.
Can you say that again, please? 45?
45 and 78.
Correct.
78 being the two-bedroom?
Correct.
And 45 being the 3?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Blanton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to the residential project, if that were to go forward, it seems like it's being represented here that it wouldn't have a negative impact on a potential hotel development down the road. Can you explain that a little bit? How, if the property was tied on up with this, a pretty significant residential development, how that's not going to be a negative impact or affect adversely the hotel development if that comes down?
If I might, in our contract with the hotel developer, it provides for us doing the residential portion either before or after. I mean, it was originally scheduled to put the hotel up first because that was sort of the big goal, was to get that hotel going and get it up and then do a residential project and bring in the outside businesses, be them restaurants, et cetera. So that's the way it was always designed. It's just now if we're forced into it, we'll do the residential project first. That's not what we want to do. That's not, what the design essentially was and what direction we thought best for the project itself. We still feel the project itself would be best off if we can have the Byrons resolve their issue, purchase that property, do the hotel first, and then go around the hotel and make sure we get that up and running.
And you're talking a 110-room hotel or 101-room hotel?
Correct. It was a 100-room hotel.
A 100-room hotel, and no restaurant in the hotel?
The restaurant was attached to the hotel, so there would be a covered patio that's going to connect the hotel to the restaurant.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
that was under separate corporation, though, is that correct?
The restaurant?
Yes.
Correct.
Well,
Correct.
now, in looking at the plans, okay, number one, the plans you submitted through your engineer with the fire chief for review, there is no restaurant in the hotel, according to the fire chief, because he asked your engineer, in order to be able to assess what had to be done to provide adequate fire coverage, where the restaurant would, he says, where are you gonna feed these people, where's the restaurant gonna be? And your engineer said, over behind the Keystone in a conference center. That's what the engineer, Mr. Lamoureux, or?
Off on Horsey Witten.
Wesley Witten?
Yeah, Mr.
Justin?
Justin Lamoureux?
Correct.
Okay, so that's what he said. These are the plans the fire chief let me borrow for the day. So, and I presume that since it's gonna be not an attached, it looks like it's gonna be a separate building, separate entity type of thing. Is that-
It's a separate entity, but it will be attached. The hotel chain will not allow a restaurant in the hotel, but they will allow for a covered corridor to connect the two together. So that was the reason that it was not allowed in the.
But that's not part of the hotel, I would not think, if the hotel chain would not permit a restaurant in the hotel. I presume it's one of these where you come down in the morning, they've got cereal and stuff out, you just grab
Correct.
your stuff and you go. Okay, all right. So that is a separate but attached by corridor.
Jerry's got his hand up.
Mr. Ellis?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your residential development, how many acres did you say you're going to do?
We have 3.5 acres that we currently own.
Okay, 3.5,
Correct.
and that would be the residential that you do?
Correct.
And would that be 40B construction?
No.
That won't be 40B construction?
Correct. It will not. Originally, we came to the board for a 144-unit residential complex, so now we're bringing that number down to 126. And if we do the hotel first, then the number would probably go back to the 144 because we would have the acreage for that. But the acreage now allows, and what we're doing wouldn't need any variances, special permits. It's allowed by use, by right, by all your zoning bylaws. So it would be
So
a
on
four-story
3.5
building.
acres, you're gonna put up, those numbers, the 45 and 78, is that correct?
Correct,
123.
123.
correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And what's the gallonage that each of those units would utilize?
About 150 on the three-bedroom roughly. Is that correct? And
Well, speaking with my engineer, based on the bedrooms and the 108 gallons that we were given a day allocation, they gave us the number of 126 bedrooms total, based on the calculation. And that's how we broke up the number of bedrooms.
126
it's about,
bedrooms.
yeah, it's about 100 and,
Well, you got 45, you said you've got 78 two-bedroom and 45 three-bedroom. So that counts for 123 units,
Correct.
but the bedrooms would actually be more than that.
Well, the bedrooms
They're on
definitely.
100, it would be
240.
135, 135 with the three-bedroom, 45 times 3. And then there was how many? 70?
78 two-bedroom.
Two-bedroom, that would be
156.
156.
291.
291, and it's about 100 gallons a day roughly.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
110, yeah.
Other members of the board have questions? Okay, let me ask you a question since you're standing
Yes.
at the podium, sir. How much time are you asking the board to consider extending your allotment
For the hotel,
for the hotel?
I guess that would be, I'd have to ask my attorney on that, because again, the legal standpoint, I have no idea. It's out of our control. We're ready to close. We have the money. It's,
If I can answer that, what I'd like to say is give us 3 months. But I'm not saying that if this case actually were to proceed to trial, that it would be tried and resolved in 3 months. But as much as you would like to keep the pressure on us, we would like to keep the pressure on the project. And by having deadlines, we actually help keep the pressure on our project and see if we can get closer to a resolution.
Let me ask, Mr. Blanton, go ahead.
You're going to pretrial conference June 15th? So there'll
June
be-
15th is the date that it's been assigned by the court.
So
I
that's
know that Attorney Drilling asked for a date in May and tried to urge the court in terms of the time factors involved in getting the project done, but in this case, the project is not the court's main concern.
That's a little less than 2 months from now.
Right. That's for the pretrial conference,
Right.
but what typically happens at a pretrial conference is both sides are required to submit a memorandum and position what their positions are. Sometimes when you're forced to give your position, the court then starts to intervene a bit and say whether one position or the other has no merit to it. So sometimes at that pretrial conference, even if the parties have not resolved it before they go in, by the time a judge says, maybe after you listen to what I have to say and I'm the judge that's gonna try the case, because that's the way the probate court works. You're assigned a judge, the judge stays with that case throughout. They generally tell you, this is how I'm likely to rule, unless the evidence is very different than what you've submitted in your memorandums. Maybe you ought to go outside and resolve it based on what I've just told you, or you can continue churning the clock on your lawyers, and I'll give you a trial date whenever it's available. So, you know.
So ideally, you would prefer to do the hotel.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And as
And-
would our hotel people.
Right.
I mean, as much as I can tell you that we want to do the hotel project, whether it's before or after, I can't tell you that the hotel people are going to be around
Okay.
9 months from now.
Right. But if, best case scenario, say you could pass in September or October, correct? What's the timeframe on hotel completion for a 100-room hotel?
I know that they're looking at us trying to resolve this matter by the end of May
Of this year?
of this year. That's what they're looking for in order for them to start construction and get the project ready for, I think it's the spring of next year.
Okay.
And if they can't do that, they have to, they're gonna wait till the following year.
Based upon your desire to do the hotel first, and based upon prior discussions with this commission, that you have had, up until now, a year and a half plus, isn't it? That you've maintained a sewer allocation of 27,108 gallons, which is not really benefiting anybody, it's just sitting there, but you folks. Would you, since you want the hotel, and it's 100 rooms, and we have other people waiting to start developing, as we indicated in our last meeting, would you consider, because I think the board could consider, would you consider taking the allocation for just the hotel at the 100 rooms at 110 gallons a day, for a total of about 11,000 gallons, and then we could accommodate other developers who are ready to break ground or state that they're ready to break ground in another area of Buzzards Bay. And that way, if it's gonna take 6 months before you're able to break ground based upon your hoping that the probate court will see fit to force the sale, if, you could then become part of what Mr. Yule described as a completion date of December 2017, which is only a year and a half away, for your restaurant portion with your conference center.
I think that if that were the direction that you would like to go, or that you might be inclined to go, we would want you to give us at least that first 3 months to try to put this project together with the Byron family and use the pressure of the court now that the case is there. The problem with your suggestion is I don't know whether the hotel folks are gonna be comfortable. They're obviously not looking to build a hotel in the middle of nowhere and without other businesses coming in around that hotel. And that, I know that that's their plan and design, is that once they build and construct, that other businesses are going to be coming. And that's why we have the acreage that we do, is because this is geared to be a much larger development than just put a hotel up and not put other businesses up and around it, which support off the hotel and which help support the hotel. So we would have to talk with the hotel developers and say, this is one of the things on the table. Is this something that you can work with? Are you still willing to work with us? And there may be a delay of building up around you.
Well, say it
So-
takes, well, just say, for example, it takes, if, say you successfully get the Byron families to sell either through agreement or through the order of the court.
Yes.
You're probably not gonna be completed construction on your hotel until sometime in, I would say, late 2017. And I don't believe you have any concrete, maybe you do have plans for your restaurant and conference center down the road, but I would seem to be after that. That's the only thing. See, I'm trying to see if we can accommodate multiple businesses that will bring
I have some
jobs
questions, but-
and as well as, people that, the tertiary stuff. The people that come to town, then they work here, then they go get their car fixed here and stuff like that. So I guess Mr. Ellis had a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Bellows, I think you need to understand, we're technically between a rock and a hard place because, excuse me, we do have two reasonably large other projects right behind you. They're in the waiting process. If you were to do this today, then they're set to go as soon as that extra gallonage loosens up to get going. Their projects are just as important to them as this one is to you. In fact, one of them may be a little different in scope. It may be helping the town a little bit more with the type of housing it's going to provide. So I would say to you that this board has been very good to you and your client and going the extra mile to try and help you out. I hope you're coming back with that and doing all you can to get the other side working and getting off their buns to get this corrected, because these other people have money problems in the background that they're trying to hold on to their people that are supporting them. So it puts a very tentative agreement, and you heard the previous statement about what's happening with our sewer problems in town, and we're trying to remedy that. So the more you extend this, the more the problems expand. So it's imperative that if this board does anything further to give you more leeway, your performer, we need to have 1,000%. And I'm sure you are, because that's what you're paying big bucks for. And I'm sure that the previous lawyer who got up here is probably going to think about another secretary and pay her more money. But the bottom line is that I think that we're in a difficult position. We're trying to help you. We have bent over backwards to do that. And I just think you have to understand that it's a very difficult position that you've put all of us in.
Well, I'm not sure that, I appreciate what you're saying to me, but I'm not sure that we're putting you in that position. I mean, we've been put in the position when we have a contract to purchase property that is pens for a year and a half. We work towards that project. We spend a lot of money, all the money that we needed to spend in order to get it to the table, and then somebody on the other side walks away. Now, we have two choices. We can continue to work towards the culmination of that project, or we can risk alienating the other 5 members of the Byron family, file our lawsuit, tie up the property with the Liz Pendens for the next 3 years, and battle out on the money aspect. I mean, technically, on a contract case, you're entitled to the benefit of your bargain. Well, we have the contracts in place to build a hotel. We have the plans in place to build the residential housing. We have a restaurant theoretically coming down to open up. So, I mean, we have a lot of things in the works here, and I'm afraid it's been taken out of our hands somewhat. If there's got to be a fire lit, the fire has to be lit on Mr. Drilling and Attorney Human, who represented all 6 of the Byron family members when they signed the purchase and sale agreement and said, we agree to sell you this property. So we have done, I believe we've done our part. We had a slow beginning, but on a project of this size, I don't think it was that unusual. We've hit this snag, and we need to try to get over the snag. I think it's best for the town and it's best for us if we can put the project together rather than start busting it up. If I just walk away and say, yeah, that's fine, and then I walk out of here with the allocation specifically for a hotel, and my hotel developer says, you know, no, that doesn't work for us. Where am I with my 25 Perry Ave, to which all of this gallonage has been allocated? I mean, I believe you've allocated all of the gallonage to 25 Perry Ave.
25 Perry Ave Corp., I believe.
In 25 Perry Ave Corp. owns that 3 acres of land.
Okay.
It doesn't have a contract to buy any other property in the town of Bourne.
Mr. Mealy?
Yeah, if I could, are you actually proposing tonight to ditch the hotel and the rest of it and go into this situation with the housing first?
We're saying that's our fallback. I mean,
How
that's what,
successful do you think you can be with that? Because
My-
I'm just thinking out loud here. I mean, I see you coming in and doing the housing. Now your hotel guy walks. I don't know where your financial guy is, but he may walk too because you're not doing the plan. I mean, what reassurances does the town have that the fruition of what was proposed 18 months ago or whatever is gonna pop out of the ground for us? I mean, I'm concerned that we're shifting horses because it's a fallback. I'm almost more comfortable with saying, okay, how many months do you need to get this thing done? Let's sit on it one more time, you know, and believe in the fact that this guy Byron or whatever his name is gonna come around because his, you know, his in-laws are gonna, you know, work on him a little bit. Mr. Drilling's gonna do his job. But I think if you start flip-flopping with the hotel guy, he's gonna walk. And can you tell me or tell the board?
I can't. I've tried to make it very clear that's not the position that we want. But it's the fallback position, and that's what it is a fallback position, because that's where we started. You know, that was what we originally came in to do, was do the housing first and then look for the hotel developer. I mean,
I thought the housing, refresh my memory if I'm wrong, Mr. Guarino. I thought the housing was being put off because the allocation could only be 27, at that time, 27,108. Wasn't that the case? And that we could not accommodate that much housing? So the suggestion was made to, because I wasn't the chairman at that time, and
I think I was.
yeah, and wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wasn't that the case?
Think so.
That we could
That
not
was-
allocate the amount for the housing? And because the housing took much more than you were saying a hotel with restaurant, which is where you came or where George Trabou or somebody came up with the amount of 27,108 gallons. I believe that was the case. I don't believe it was, we're saying, no, you gotta do the restaurant you gotta do the hotel with restaurant before you do the housing. We were saying we didn't have the gallonage, I thought.
We would have been right up against it, given
And I think that was our position.
those that had paid betterments that may not have been turned on, we had to provide them an allocation of
Right.
some sort, because we never.
Exactly. Because we went through that whole thing with Mr. Trabou,
But I don't
Had a
believe
sewer
that this is the same size, am I incorrect?
Smaller.
This is smaller.
And if my recollect, back to the meeting, the question brought up was, you're a residential developer, how do we know you're not gonna build a residential and not build a hotel? And that's how the discussion started, and I said, well, I'm not gonna buy 15 acres to build something on 3 acres, I just buy the 3 acres. And I said, to show trust, we'll switch the plan around, we'll ditch our residential, and if the town wants a hotel that fits for the town, we'll search for a hotel developer, and that's what we did.
All right.
Because before the last submission of the plan that was granted on Main Street, there was enough allocation to do the residential.
Right, but from the board's perspective, it left nothing else to do
Correct.
anything else.
Correct.
Okay, so, members of the board have any more questions, or do you have anything you'd like to add, gentlemen? Or
no, just,
you want to bring your engineers up? They getting paid to be here, you might as well hear from them. All
if
right.
you have questions of them,
Okay.
and you want to put them to work, but again, I'd like to just make it clear that
Yeah.
what we'd really like is the board to just extend us at least for 3 months. We know that we have a hearing date coming up, or they have a hearing date coming up June 15th. Martin Drilling needs some opportunity to try to negotiate a settlement, since this lawyer has just appeared for Mr. Byron within the last week or so. And my understanding from talking to Martin is the lawyers sort of agree that what ought to happen is that the deal ought to be consummated, and then the family ought to fight about how the money is divided, not hold up the deal to spicing up one's leverage on how the money
According
is
to your, according to the document that one of the attorneys provided, it's right here. There's no, there should not be very much in the way of leeway of who gets what percentage. It's right here with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 names, and it totals 100%. And some get 20 and some get 10. So I don't know that that's really a big stumbling block, but it is what it is.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Mr. Meyer.
At this point, if we're looking at this track record, you filed a motion in probate on February 17th. You were heard on August 25th, so you're talking 2 months there. You got roughly 7 weeks to 6/15 for the pre-trial. What?
April 25th.
April.
Yeah.
April to June, it's roughly another 7 weeks. So I'd like to make a motion that we extend you out to no later than August 15th. That gives you 2 months. Okay, you're working on roughly a 2-month window each time to get your ducks in a row. If at that time, you know, if you can't come to any sort of agreement by August 15th, you shall forfeit your allocation. Or you have to come back to the board and
I prefer the language be, if you're looking to that date, I'd like another month of leeway, but if you're looking to that date, that the board will reassess. I don't want to give my opposition the idea that if they can just delay this out
Right.
to this specific date, then they can kill the deal.
But if we said
That
this-
sends a bad message
If we
out.
said December 31st, they would try to break it out to December 31st possibly if they were, as you say, your
I'm just trying to give you
opposition.
something that I think is as realistic as I can, and I say the same thing over again. I think that,
what's the last Thursday?
I'd like you to say 6 months, except I think if you said 6 months, that might hurt us in trying to get this to a speedier resolution.
And
Martin's gotta go back and talk to a judge and say, this is what happened at the hearing, and this is what the sewer commissioners did or said.
It gives you
Yeah.
4.5 months.
yeah, well,
Mr. Chairman?
this also, we're in a position where we have other developers that want to do something, and we're not getting one dime for this holdup of a year and a half, which is now going to be closer to 2 years. Ideally, the board will have I think the next board will probably have a policy on, from now on, you want a sewer allocation in the future. It's gonna cost you so many thousands of dollars per month to keep. But that's
a good idea.
that's something coming down the road. It's kinda like, you wanna be on the mooring waiting list, you gotta pay for it, so,
Mr. Chairman?
go ahead.
No, I was just saying, we looked at that a while ago with different towns on the Cape and in
Yeah.
the area. Unfortunately, the towns that we looked at either didn't have
Right.
sewering, or they had so much capacity it didn't matter. So we gotta broaden our search out for that, reserve capacity fee.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Meyer.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we continue
Well,
this.
you gotta withdraw your other mo.
I'll withdraw my other motion. I know
You
second.
didn't get a,
Second, so here's my new motion. My motion is to extend this out or continue out to August 25th, 2016, for the purposes of this, matter.
I'll second that for the purposes of discussion.
That's the last Thursday in August, so that gives you 4 months.
Anybody have anything? Mr. Ellis, Mr. Mealy, Mr. Blanton? Go right ahead, Mr. Blanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The project proponents have asked us for a 3-month window, and that covers beyond their pre-town conference in 2 months. I think we ought to shore that date on up to July 15th and give them that 3-month window, and then after such time, if we don't have a satisfactory report, then we start we bring back the discussion with regard to limiting the gallonage to what seems to be appropriate, given the new direction they may have at that point in time. I don't think we need to necessarily extend this out any further beyond that to August. I would move to amend that motion to,
Last
he's
Tuesday in July is July
Mr.
26th.
Mealy?
Yeah, if I could. I really want this project to be successful, and I think if the other fellows were in front of us, I'd say the same thing. I think part of our problem, and we're in this together, it's not your fault and it's not our fault, it's everybody's fault. We didn't have a policy. We went into this thinking, okay, you guys have come in, you've made an application, you're gonna build up a hotel and that kind of stuff, and we gave it to you. We had no idea about the Byrons, we didn't have any idea about all the other complications that have held you up. And now we're finding ourselves, again, down the road. I would feel more comfortable going to August only to say that this is going to be more than enough adequate time. It's more than what you're asking. It's going to give you an opportunity to dot your i's and cross your t's. But we also have to recognize that the town needs to develop prior to any more allocations to anybody. We've got to have some type of a policy. We're up here winging it, playing by the seat of our pants about, and we're dealing with developments that have got financing or may have or may not have. We have, so I really think that if this board wants to act, we go to the 25th of August. If the motion has been seconded, I'll second it.
it was seconded.
And I think the other thing that I would ask is, if you get halfway through July and something pops, you gotta come in and talk to us. I mean, there are other people that are, we've said that. There are other people that are trying to get on the wagon, and for good or for bad, we really need to communicate more than just coming in the night, This whole thing with switching this and all that, all it's doing, I think, is muddying the waters for us all. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
the
Garino.
the fourth Tuesday in August is August 23rd.
I was thinking of Thursday, I'm sorry.
The last Tuesday in August is August 30th.
23rd.
Okay, so there was a motion, I guess. You'd originally asked for, Mr. Blanton had asked for a reduction in time to July.
No one
But
actually.
But there's
went
no
forward with
action
that.
on it, so, I just, I feel extremely bad that we can't, as the old saying goes, kill two birds with one stone, give you your 11,000 gallons for the hotel, and have the other 16,000 gallons for another developer. That would both, your project and their project, would benefit the community by virtue of the construction jobs going in, the employees, all the ancillary stuff. But I don't know. Mr. Ellis, anything from you?
Yeah, I think that someplace along the line here, there needs to be a firewall put up here. I mean, we're going on and on and on, and we understand your problem, you have to understand our problem, but we got other people in town that want to build, they're ready to go, they're in a further advance down the road than you are, and all of a sudden, as stated by Mr. Mealy, we're trying to do this the best way we can, but it's very difficult for us to stand around and have somebody else come in here as a developer and say, I'm ready to go, why can't I go? And we're limited by the amount of gallons we can give you. So I'm not perplexed, I'm a little concerned about, on August 30th, you come back in here and you tell us the same thing, and I need 30 more days, or I need 40, 50 more days. That doesn't help anybody. All it's doing is creating a hell of a problem for the town economic base that we're trying to revitalize Buzzards Bay, and it's not happening because you guys have got to put a stick of dynamite someplace. And Mr. Mealy's correct. You need to come, if you have something happen next week, you need to come in here and notify us to let us know what's going on. Because this is no way to run a bloody ship, let me tell you.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
the August date may be advantageous in some other ways as well, going back to your original thought process, if I could. if we get into August, if we get another four months down the road, and you have a 18-month construction schedule, or a 15-month construction schedule, it's put off a year anyways, come August, because they won't be able to be ready in the spring based on what your attorney has said. If they can break ground now, they can be open next spring. They can't break ground till October, they're not open next spring, based on the construction schedule. My thought is, if we get down 4 months down the road,
It's true. I have 4 months there, right?
4 months down the road, and we have a plant that's gonna be, barring any complications, and I don't think there will be any, up and ready in,
Byrons are not associated with the plant.
I understand that, in December of 17, the sewer commissioners at that point, because your construction schedule is put off, could in fact bifurcate this 11,000 gallons, if the commissioners were so to vote, allocate the first 16,000 gallons of this new plant to the project, assuming you have a project, and I hope you have a project. That 4 months may give you the wiggle room that both, in the meantime, we look at a reserve capacity allocation
Right.
policy, but that may give you both pieces of this.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Meyer.
I just would like to amend my date. A friendly amendment, instead of 8/25, it's 8/23.
Second.
Got an amended date in the amended motion. Anything else, members of the board? Questions of the public? Mr. Mulby? Did you have a question, sir?
I just wondered if that, you changed your motion, I just wondered if the second.
He did,
Yes.
he did amend his second,
Yes.
yeah. Okay. All right. So to get this straight, we got a motion on the floor for an update
Yep.
on August 23rd,
Yes.
Tuesday, at a sewer commissioners meeting, to be updated by the proponents. Anything I missed? Okay. Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Mr. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Blanton,
Yes.
Mr. Ellis.
No.
Chair will vote yes, but reluctantly, because I think that I'd like to see a little more of a, as I said, kill two birds with one stone. But you have it until the 23rd, at which time we are hoping to have some resolution so that we don't have, so the next chairman of this committee, come in about 3 weeks, doesn't have to deal with this. All right, the next item on the agenda.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is discussion regarding future allocations. Do we actually need that?
I don't believe this.
If I could, under discussions, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman, what I'd like to do is revisit developing some type of policy that could be made by this board relative to allocations, so
Right.
that we've got some guidelines, not only for us, but also for the people
Right.
that are waiting in the wings. And I would suggest we try to do that within maybe by June 1st, set a hard date at it and make it happen.
Okay,
I'd be very happy to work.
okay.
With-
Why don't we have a subcommittee of 2 members of the board who are interested in doing that? Mr. Mealy has volunteered. Does anybody else have an inkling to become involved? Mr. Blanton and Mr. Mealy are a subcommittee of the Board of Sewer Commissioners that are charged with coming up with a policy relevant to future wastewater allocations for the town and, or at least for Buzzards Bay. And if you need to rely upon the wastewater advisory committee, I suggest that you might utilize their previous study if they have any on it, and I'm sure they do. So, the next meeting date, Mr. Guarino, is August 23rd.
No,
No.
May 24th.
Kidding.
Well done. It would be the last Tuesday in May.
May, okay.
24th.
Whatever that is. Okay, the 24th? All right.
31st, yeah.
The what?
Well, we meet the 4th, Tuesday, so it'd be the 24th.
All right, fine. All right. So that is our next meeting date. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a so moved twice. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, the Board of Sewer Commissioners meeting is now adjourned, and we will break for a few minutes, I guess, Mr. Chairman, or 5 minutes to reshuffle the chairs. Yep.